Have you ever stopped to reflect on why the world seems to be increasingly chaotic and divided? Why even the church, which has always been a beacon of hope and guidance, seems to be going through times of uncertainty. This sense of confusion and disorientation that is taking hold of society and permeating the church is not the result of chance. If we truly believe in God's word, we know that nothing happens unless He allows it, and often warns us beforehand through His signs and revelations. So why has God allowed this wave of chaos and deception to spread, causing so much pain and leading so many souls to perdition? Could it be that He has already warned us about this, and we haven't paid attention? Or perhaps divine warnings have been ignored over time. The fact is that heaven always sends us warning messages, and it's up to us to open our hearts and minds to understand them. Throughout this reflection, we will delve into the reasons behind this disorientation that afflicts humanity and especially the church. We will explore how these times of confusion are not only a trial, but also an urgent call to turn to God and His messages, which have been sent as a spiritual preparation for what is to come. After all, divine warnings not only alert us, but guide us on the way forward in times of darkness and uncertainty. Do you want to know the truth? This is your chance to understand what is really happening in the world around us. We are living in times of intense upheaval, and it's not hard to see that this massive turbulence is no accident. It has already been foretold in the Holy Scriptures, which warn us of a great deception to come. Looking at current events, it is impossible not to recognize that we are in a period of mass disorientation. St. Paul had already diagnosed this reality. Widespread deception, spiritual confusion, and the rampant spread of evil have their roots in humanity's ingratitude, indifference to God, and, above all, the pride that leads man to reject the Creator. The result is a diabolical darkening of the intellect, a real blockage of the conscience, which prevents human beings from living according to their divine purpose. This distancing from God causes an emptying of grace in the soul, causing man to lose the ability to discern good from evil. It's as if diabolical guidance makes us believe that we have total control over our lives, that we can decide for ourselves what is good and true without the need to refer to God. In this way, human beings come to believe that their will is enough, abandoning eternal truth for an illusion of self-sufficiency. Saint Hildegard of Bingen, in her prophetic visions, warned that in recent times the church would be attacked from within, especially by a gray wolf, who would use ambiguity as a weapon. The enemy is cunning, because he knows that it is much easier to divert souls from the path of truth when the clear line between right and wrong is erased. By turning everything into a nebulous zone, where black and white blend into a mess of gray, evil hides behind a false neutrality. In this way, it allows the spirit of the age, the zeitgeist, to influence hearts and minds, while its plans remain hidden and silent. It is in this context that humanity must awaken. We need to be alert to the traps of a world that is increasingly trying to make us forget our dependence on God and His eternal truth. Father Malachi Martin, who had access to the third secret of Fatima through Cardinal B, whose secretary he was, revealed some worrying aspects of its content. According to him, the secret speaks of two chastisements, one physical and the other of a spiritual nature, with apostasy within the church itself being the main scenario of this revelation. Martin claimed that the spiritual punishment had already begun, and that it was the direct result of the church's disobedience in not divulging the third secret as Our Lady had instructed. This disobedience, according to him, persists to this day with alarming consequences. Today, we can see how faith is disappearing in many parts of the world. Entire countries and even continents are moving away from their Christian roots. And even many of the elect, those who should be the spiritual guides, are losing faith. Martin emphasized that the situation is deteriorating to such an extent that, without Our Lady's intervention, no one can be saved. This warning echoes the seriousness of the current moment. in which loss of faith and spiritual confusion are spreading like never before. When Pope John XCI refused to reveal the third secret and consecrate Russia, as requested by Our Lady, Martin believed that this resulted in a loss of grace for both him and the Church as a whole. As a consequence of this disobedience, Satan would have gained greater influence at the highest levels of the ecclesiastical hierarchy. This has led to a situation in which, according to Martin, the last pope before the purification of the Church and the world will, in a way, be under the control of evil forces. Malachi Martin's vision is reinforced by another prophetic account. Father Yasuda, confessor of Sister Agnes Sasagawa, a visionary from Akita, shared a similar prophecy. He said that the last pope would betray Jesus Christ, handing him over to the enemies of the faith. Martin, however, pointed out that there are several ways in which Satan can control a human being, suggesting that the spiritual battle is much more complex than imagined. These revelations, both from Fatima and Akita, underline the seriousness of the times in which we live. The spiritual struggle seems to be reaching its climax within the Church itself, and the only hope lies in the divine intervention promised by Our Lady. It is an urgent call to prayer, vigilance, and renewal of faith in the face of a crisis that threatens the very salvation of souls. A person can surrender their soul to the devil in exchange for favors, or Satan can exercise indirect control, manipulating the people around him and circumstances to influence even figures of great power. Thus, it is possible for a pope to be controlled by evil forces if those around him in the Curia do not obey him and plot against his pontificate. This idea has been raised by many scholars and ecclesiastical leaders concerned about the direction of the Church. One of the most conservative prelates of his time, Cardinal Silvio Adi, who served as Pope John XCI's secretary, gave an interview in 1990 in which he recounted a disconcerting moment between him and the Holy Father. Adi confessed that there was one thing he couldn't forgive the Pope for. Surprised, John XCI asked what it was, and Adi replied, "Not having revealed the third secret of Fatima." The Pope's response was evasive. "Let's not talk about that." This interaction intrigued the cardinal, who began to wonder what had happened in 1960 that could be related to the mysterious secret of Fatima. The most striking event of that period was undoubtedly the convocation of the Second Vatican Council. In view of this, Adi came to the conclusion that perhaps the secret of Fatima had a connection with the council itself. John XCI convened Vatican II with the intention of renewing the Church from its foundations. But, as we all know, the process brought both merits and unexpected consequences. Adi mentioned, for example, the large number of priests who left the priesthood after the council. There is talk of around 80,000 priests abandoning their vocations. In addition, he recalled the deep anguish of Pope Paul VI, who, in 1968, lamented the self-demolition that was taking place within the Church. His concern became even clearer in 1972, when he declared that the smoke of Satan had entered the Church, an alarming metaphor that reflected the extent to which he believed evil spiritual forces were influencing the institution. These reflections by cardinals and popes show the complexity of the spiritual landscape within the Church. It's not just about political or administrative decisions, but a real spiritual battle that can influence the direction of the Catholic faith. The connection between the third secret of Fatima, the Second Vatican Council, and the challenges faced by the Church since then raises profound questions about the role of disobedience, the influence of evil forces, and the struggle to preserve the faith. The silence surrounding the secret and the consequences of its non-revelation continue to fuel speculation about what could have been avoided if Our Lady's warnings had been followed to the letter. Sister Lucia of Fatima, one of the main seers of the Marian apparitions, wrote repeatedly about what she called diabolical disorientation, a phenomenon to which she attributed the cause of the great apostasy that has struck the Church. According to her, this disorientation was not merely the fruit of human error, but part of a rebellion orchestrated by the powers of darkness against God, His Church, His doctrines, and sacred dogmas. In her letters and writings, Lucia warned of how this diabolical force was promoting a widespread deviation of souls, leading many into error. A conservative priest concerned about this situation even wrote to her, highlighting the seriousness of the diabolical disorientation which, according to him, was spreading throughout the world and dragging souls away from God. This priest lamented the fact that many priests were being dominated by this evil wave, becoming blind men who lead other blind men, unable to perceive the true faith and the gravity of the moment. What these warnings reveal is the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, such as that of La Salette in 1846, which was rejected by many ecclesiastical authorities at the time. According to this prophecy, a large number of priests and members of religious orders would turn away from the true religion, and most alarmingly, there would even be bishops among them. The prophecy also announced that the devil would use all his wiles to infiltrate sinners into religious orders, turning many convents, which were supposed to be houses of prayer and holiness, into grazing grounds for demons like Asmodeus and his followers. If that wasn't disturbing enough, the warnings of Our Lady of Akita reinforced this gloomy scenario. She revealed that the devil's work would infiltrate even the structures of the church, causing divisions so deep that cardinals will turn against cardinals, bishops against bishops. The prophecy also warned that priests who remained faithful to Marian devotion and the true faith would be despised and fought against by their own brothers in the priesthood. The response of the ecclesiastical authorities to these warnings was often one of neglect or rejection. Akita's own seer, Sister Agnes Sasagawa, was practically excluded from her convent, living out her last years in isolation. She passed away in 2024 in a retirement home without having received a formal funeral, which reflects the difficulty that many of these messages have faced within the church over the years. These events show that the spiritual battle to preserve the true faith is a concrete and painful reality. The diabolical disorientation so emphasized by Lucia and other visionaries is a real threat that continues to manifest itself, not only on an individual level, but also within the very structures of the church. In May 2024, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, under the leadership of Cardinal Tucho Fernandez, issued new guidelines on the discernment of apparitions. From now on, it has been announced that the Church will no longer issue definitive judgments on the supernatural or non-supernatural nature of these manifestations. However, it is curious to note that, although this is the new guideline, the Dicastery has already taken a position on some specific apparitions. In particular, it has issued critical opinions on 2 of the 8 apparitions examined, and precisely those that contain criticism of the Church and priests. These 2 apparitions, which the Dicastery has discredited both from a doctrinal point of view and in relation to their supposed supernatural origin, are those of Trevignano Romano, associated with the seer Gisela Cardia, and the apparition known as the Lady of All Peoples, linked to Ida Peerdeman. The fact that the Church has decided to position itself specifically on these apparitions raises questions. Why, despite the new guideline of abstaining from judgment, were they categorized as non-supernatural? This decision generates debate among the faithful, especially considering the context of criticism of the ecclesiastical hierarchy present in the messages of these seers. Reflecting on these events, it is inevitable to think about the origins of the spiritual tribulations that the Church and the world have faced since the 1960s. Many point to disobedience to Our Lady's requests, especially the failure to divulge the 3rd secret of Fatima in 1960, as a possible cause for these spiritual chastisements. This secret, which supposedly speaks of an apostasy that would take over the Church and the world, was kept secret, and many wonder what the consequences would have been if it had been revealed at the right time. Now, let's imagine, if the Church had published the 3rd secret of Fatima in 1960, would the faithful and priests have believed its warnings about the impending apostasy? Or would it have been seen as an exaggeration, something far removed from the reality of that time? Today, in the face of spiritual confusion and crises within the Church itself, this question becomes even more relevant. If these reflections arouse your interest, We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, like this video, and share it with your friends. After all, in a world where faith and truth are constantly in dispute, it is essential that we continue to discuss these issues with discernment and openness to what heaven has revealed to us.